Here's a scenario.
Oh my God.
You're the chief security officer on a ship.
So?
Deep space research vessel.
She's loose.
Find something.
Wait,
You've met them, I think.
how big did these things get?
The monsters.
It's a xenomorph.
What she didn't tell you
Still in early stage development.
is that
but
far
going
fried
fast.
our navigational systems, meaning we were a spaceship,
It gets worse.
but never a missile. In 24 hours, this ship turns from missile to arrow.
2 people are dead. We've lost creature containment. And one of you is trying to destroy this ship.
We need help.
It got 10.
What got it?
I don't know, something big.
They're all dead.
There's a feeling you get
When the monsters come,
when you hear the screams. And all you can do is save yourself. Are you a robot?
Xenomorphs have proven to be a staple of the Alien IP, and that sentence does sound redundant, but in a lot of franchises, especially the cinematic kind, usually you rely heavily on the characters. However, the Alien franchise has persisted despite whatever happens to his characters at any moment. Despite the change in themes, despite the change in tones, despite sometimes even a change in genre, the Xenomorph has remained a consistent icon for why we should never pick up anything from space, let alone bring it back home to Earth. And in the show, Alien Earth, we find out how exactly the Xenomorph made its way here, following the story of the USCSS Maginot, a Weyland-Yutani bioresearch vessel sent to collect specimens from all sorts of moons. But how did the rest of the ship actually go down? Well, this whole episode, the creatives behind it really did a good job building the tension. Every sequence, you never know if a xenomorph is nearby, you never know if a character is about to get grabbed, and you never know if you're about to see something really disgusting. While the show's not perfect, it does do a very good job building the tension when it needs to and hiding the aliens where it needs to. On their journey to collect these specimens, several people died. And honestly, after this episode, I'm not too surprised. See, Marrow is a character who, for the most part, has become my top favorite next to Kirsch throughout the whole series. And at first I was a little bit hesitant to like him because he just came off a little aggressive. I also don't like that he left someone to die for seemingly no reason. Had I known the crew that he was dealing with the entire time on the Maginot, I wouldn't have blamed him. See, in Alien Earth, we get a little sub-story to explain how exactly all these different species of alien presumably got to and took over Earth. And since this ship has landed on Earth, the character of Marrow has been dead set on getting his specimens back. We find out a little bit more in this episode for his reasonings and his drive. But it's very easy to see that in this Neverland pseudo-story they're telling, the character of Marrow definitely takes the place of Captain Hook, who I originally thought Kirsch could fill that role, but it's obvious Marrow is definitely the one to do it, especially considering the lack of a hand. Don't know how I didn't piece that together. The last we saw of the Maginot crew, they were being prepared to go into cryo-sleep before returning to Earth. And now, just a few days out from actually returning to Earth, some of the crew are woken up and we find that there has been an emergency. See, it turns out there was a saboteur on board. Someone was directed to essentially tamper with the ship and guide it straight to a certain place on Earth. It's later revealed that it's actually due to a rival corporation's involvement in Prodigy.
It's Prodigy, as in the boy wonder. Me.
But Marrow is able to put together who the actual saboteur is, the person who ended up working with Boy K. So that essentially means that Peter Pan took Captain Hook's treasure. And so while this saboteur is running around the ship without anybody really noticing, everyone's trying to piece together what exactly is going on, especially after there was a breach in their containment section. With 2 of the facehuggers released, they're able to take out 2 members of the crew, that in the captain and a character named Bronsky. One of the crew members, Raheem, ended up trying to remove the facehugger from the captain. This resulted in the acid severing his head completely. The crew decides the best course of action is to put Bronsky in a cryopod and hopefully wait till they get back to Earth so the company can hopefully figure out what to do with Bronsky and the facehugger on him. And fun fact, this is very similar to a sequence in the comic book series of Alien Earth, which is definitely a separate story than this that follows Hicks and Newt. And if you want to see a little bit more about the story but don't necessarily know how to read, I highly recommend checking out Alien Theory's channel, who has an entire playlist covering the fall of Earth. Again, completely separate story. It's here we actually get a really cool quote from Raheem about another victory for the enemy of reason.
Another victory for the enemy of reason. It means this space bug is proof of how stupid smart people can be. Smart enough to build ships capable of space travel, of splitting the atom and decoding the genome, but too stupid to realize you don't bring parasites home with you.
Essentially, that boils down the entire franchise to humanity kind of screws itself over every single time, especially when it comes to our lack of consideration for others and their safety. And this is where we start to see why the crew of the Maginot aren't the most professional. One, let's talk about some of the things that's been going on in the background. Let's go ahead and break down all the mistakes the crew of the Maginot began to make before the outbreak inevitably took hold. One, why are you fornicating in the specimen room? Of all places you could actually be hooking up, I just can't see the appeal. Especially with that eyeball creature staring you down, like, whoa. Next, let's go to breaking down a sterile environment. For any procedure or research or study of any biological entity whatsoever, usually you make sure your environment's completely sterile. You're not eating sandwiches and sipping drinks right there with open containers. Now, this is kind of a result of being overworked and a lack of sleep, sure, but at the same time, any professional, especially someone sent on such a dangerous mission, and who's seemingly seen these things kill people already, you'd think there'd be a lot more going on with the containment and research of these creatures. But again, the character of Shibuzo and her pets decide to hang out and have lunch together quite frequently, apparently. Now let's cut to the kid. The kid was creeping on some of the crew the entire time, which already is a huge breach in boundaries, right? Something you should report to HR, assumedly. Something that's even worse than that is Mr. Tang. I assumed he was actually a synthetic. We get a lot of clues to his character about how creepy he is and how sometimes while they're in cryosleep, he'll sit there and stare. I thought maybe there was a more android-like reasoning for it, but as the episode went on, I think this is one of his more human aspects to the character, especially considering his reaction to seeing some of the aliens later in the episode. Just came off very human. Then let's go over proper PPE. That would be personal protective equipment. See, in real life, when it comes to proper PPE, you make sure everything's sterile, you put gloves on, you have a gown on, and you have a face shield and mask on. Not in that order. In fact, there's a very proper procedure when donning and disrobing this equipment altogether. In this show, it turns out PPE procedures begin and stop with putting your gloves on. Even with the word of caution, even with a character who has already studied these creatures multiple times over, even with everyone's previously established knowledge that these creatures are extremely dangerous and attack on sight, they still decide to go through many moments throughout this episode without adorning proper PPE. Now, this could be a result of Noah Hawley or the writing team not necessarily being fully knowledgeable on the medical world, which is completely fair. It is also possible that this is a result of the sci-fi potential future we could be heading towards. Think of Interstellar, for example. When the main character is discussing his wife, he brings up a machine called an MRI that could have potentially caught her tumor beforehand and saved her life. The person he's talking to denies this existence whatsoever and calls this machine a myth. With how much control and power so few people have over everything that runs our lives, and with the continued lack of care towards our education, making sure every person is healthy and knowledgeable, it's very reasonable to believe that these people sent on these corporations, even those with a degree of being a scientist, could be going along with a skewed form of future sci-fi healthcare. And we already know Aliens is a sci-fi future that does not care about its common employee. Now let's touch on the crew's morals. Early on in the episode, we established that 2 of the crew members are dead, one specifically being the captain. And while the characters of Marrow and Severi are very interested in figuring out who could be sabotaging the entire ship, not many others seem to be too worried about the situation. Them all later having lunch and actually laughing and having a good time. I understand stress can result in people feeling different ways and doing different things, but these people were munching on food and drinking their drinks like it was no big deal, which inevitably resulted in one of them becoming infected with the aliens altogether. Either way, with everything going on, you're led to believe that the facehuggers and their infection of Bronsky and the captain could result in a Xenomorph running around the ship. And we've seen in the past, like with the Nostromo, that all it takes is one Xenomorph to really take down an entire crew. But the crew of the Maginot have even more to deal with because it turns out, due to their own negligence and just lack of professionalism, they were always doomed to suffer an outbreak. In combination with the tampering of the boy Cavalier, before all hell breaks loose, we get a little bit more about Marrow's backstory. We find out that he used to be a ruffian on the streets until he was taken in by Yutani's grandmother. Being raised by them eventually led to his loyalty for the corporation, so much so that he was even willing to leave his daughter behind. And to be fair, his daughter was young. By the time he got back, his daughter would be much older, but still in a place where they could rekindle their relationship in some way. His daughter's name being Estelle, and we see at some moment in the ship while he reads some of his notes that he's gotten throughout the years from her. Her first note being about a dream and how scared she was with him leaving, obviously at a younger age, and then a later note discussing a scholarship that she got for Weyland-Yutani. However, in this note, she does actually discuss the possibility of maybe going to Harvard instead, and some of the strict rules Weyland-Yutani has, especially considering the only university she can go to is a Weyland-Yutani corp, where they're also pretty strict about content, whatever that could be. Either way, we also get a clue to the fact that the Weyland-Yutani Corporation do really appreciate Marrow and his dedication. With his daughter questioning why, when she knows other people who have parents in Weyland-Yutani, she still gets even better treatment than them, putting together that her dad's very important. We then get the final letter that Marrow's going to be able to read, in that his daughter had unfortunately passed away at the age of 19. Now, in case his daughter actually did pass away, this really solidifies the character and helps kind of establish his drive for everything. However, someone who went to space and was hoping to see his daughter when he got back and losing her in between that time, the character still has more to potentially deal with. My argument is his daughter, at some point, especially already vocalizing her distrust with Weyland-Yutani and some of their restrictions, potentially also being heavily observed by Weyland-Yutani, could have, and stick with me here, put your tinfoil hats on, faked her own death. Is it possible that she did fake her own death and live on to accomplish other things? And no, I don't think Siberian is secretly his daughter. Please, nobody throw that theory out there. And what's even worse is, with everything that happened on the ship, he didn't even get to keep those notes that he got from his daughter, essentially meaning that all Marrow has left is his life's work. With all of the chaos, some of the characters end up killing themselves, some of the characters end up getting attacked by aliens off screen, and other characters die due to their own incompetence. There's a very interesting fight sequence that goes down, and Marrow is able to get the upper hand. But I do like the line this guy gives.
I want their monsters. Here they come.
This, coupled with the ongoing motif that it's turned from a ship to a missile to an arrow, just really helped ramp up the intensity for the rest of the episode. Then we cut to the crash itself. Marrow ends up crashing, getting out of there, and finding some of Boy K's people, specifically the LBs. In doing so, he's able to infect an LB named Slightly with some sort of data chip. Using this as a form of communication and manipulation, Marrow makes his escape and slowly plans his route to eventually take his specimens back. And by the end of this episode, we see that he meets up with Yutani, and I think this is their first time officially meeting ever. It's obvious Yutani's grandmother very much respected Marrow and demanded that he's treated in a certain way, because Marrow spoke pretty disrespectfully to Yutani. And while she's tolerating it now, and while it may be beneficial to have Marrow on her side at the moment, I think Marrow, if he lives up to the Captain Hook motif, will probably get betrayed by Yutani at some point too. We find that there's a meeting going down between Yutani and Boy K, and this could potentially settle things if the lawyers are able to do their jobs. However, knowing that Boy K specifically planned all of this, and essentially stole Yutani's lifelong project, either that meeting will go down and it will be chaotic or filled with lies, or the meeting will never happen in the first place, with Marrow leading a group of soldiers to Prodigy Island to hopefully take back his treasure from Peter Pan and the Lost Boys. Either way, the pros of this episode, I really enjoyed the intensity and some of the established character deaths, especially considering how they were investigated early on in the season. I just thought that was very well set up and reminiscent of movies like The Thing, or The Thing's prequel, which we won't talk about. Some cons would probably be the characters and how absolutely idiotic they would be considering their profession, and while it did highlight Marrow as a character, it just doesn't make much logical sense, though it does match up with some of the other stupid decisions made in this franchise. And another personal gripe of mine would probably be, I can really appreciate practical effects and the usage of such, however I do find sometimes it could be hard to utilize them in an appealing way. And personally, there was one moment in this episode where the practical effects just really didn't need to be there, and that was with the Xenomorph. Again, played by a brilliant human actor at points, and seldom using CGI, I genuinely can appreciate the effort. And while that appreciation remains, I won't sit and pretend that because it's using practical effects, it looks good all the time, even when it really doesn't on my first glance. And none of these things really break the show for me. I still think it's phenomenal, and for anyone who stuck through the entirety of The Walking Dead, this show is a piece of cake. Shots fired at The Walking Dead, sorry. Still, this was the episode I was waiting for, and I'm pretty satisfied with the fact that humanity was always going to play itself. No amount of Ripley's actions or any character's actions were ever going to stop the fact that, whether it be due to corporate espionage or sabotage, a lack of preparedness and different ideals, or even just tried and true imbecilic humanity, at the end of the day, this is just kind of proof that if there is life out there, we'll find a way to mess it up, or render it able to mess us up. Still, whoever trained these professional researchers needs to get fired. Another highlight of the episode for me was the T Ocelis actually taking on the Xenomorph directly. It's obvious it was never going to win that fight, but it's used its host to the fullest to try to take the Xeno down. And for a moment, I was actually kind of worried what would happen if the eyeball took over the Xenomorph. But unfortunately that wouldn't be the case, and it would slither away to later traumatize Nibs. That being said, I really enjoyed this episode and the story of how the Maginot and aliens got to Earth altogether. I do also hope that they highlight specifically how stupid and unprepared the crew was, because they made decisions that just really didn't need to be made. Either way, what do you guys think? Is this a reasonable story for how aliens would eventually kill Earth altogether? Or do you wish there was just a little bit more? Let me know down below, and I'll catch you guys next time.